All set now. Welcome to the Node.js Foundation Core Technical Committee meeting for April 26, 2017. And we're going to start with a stand-up of everybody who's here, which means we go to Anna first.
Yeah, so I've been working a bit more on Promise stuff. You may or may not have been watching how that's going. But just as a heads up, we may have to vote on that because Julian is still formally opposing the util.premisify PR. Then we, on the weekend, we did a Code and Learn session in Oakland with like 10 or 15 people around that. And yeah, just the usual issue and PR review. And I think the next one who's here is Colin? No, Nikita.
I was absent for a while and just trying to catch up now, so nothing from me. And next one is Colin.
Just usual issues and pull requests. I think Evan is not here, so next will be Francesca.
Nothing of note. Next is Jeremiah.
Nothing in particular. Next is Tracy, if she's here. No. James.
Working on some PRs. We're still doing some testing on 8.0.0 release. Getting ready to do an updated test build later on today. Helped out with the Code and Learn in Oakland this weekend, and that's it. I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm not sure who's next.
Josh?
Yeah, so just a little bit of issue review. Have a lot going on at Microsoft right now. I have a Diag meeting scheduled for tomorrow. I'll have to finish filling that in, but that's about all for now. Next is Michael Dawson.
Spending a good amount of time doing NAPI documentation updates based on comments, a few PRs for a couple of test editions for NAPI. Did a nightly benchmark run on the Canary and did the comparison against what's in master. Still need to do a few more of those, but gave some initial results. And just the regular ongoing work of issues, PRs, and lands. Brian's next.
Brian's not here, but he did fill in something, so I'll just read it off real quick. He is trying to keep up with open pull requests, excuse me, and reviewing other pull requests and commenting on issues. And next up is Miles.
Hello. So not a ton to report. There's some very odd failures that we're having with Canary in the Goldmine and CI right now with ESLint config. So I've been, digging into that and swearing off computers. We've also been putting together a write-up for the Foundation Medium about turbofan ignition and the decision on which we made about moving forward. So the majority of the stuff, I believe Ali is out. I do not believe Jen is here. Rod, do you have any updates?
Look, nothing of note other than just some build stuff, but yeah, nothing major.
Vargas, Michael Sasso is next.
Yeah, nothing of note. Then Rich, maybe.
Sure looks like it. Let's see, because Sacrapian's not here, Trevor's not here. Yep, just me. Okay, so along with James and Anna and Tracy Hines, I did the and help from a few collaborators like Brian English and excuse me, Joe Doyle. We did the Code and Learn in Oakland. It was small, but I think really successful. And I'll just leave it at that. Did we miss anybody? I think Evan showed up while we were doing this.
Yeah, for me, just started working on the 7.x release. Ran into some build issues though, so trying to figure those out.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? Sounds like we hit everybody. Technically speaking, I think we only have one agenda item today, but we're going to cover three things. First, there's the well, actually, before we do, we have to cover the previous meeting, which is the the update -- inspect hint text issue, which we decided we would put off till this week. So, and then over in the issue for this meeting, Josh, who is the person who put it on the agenda in the first place, said that at this point in time, it can probably just go back to GitHub and the discussion can happen there. It doesn't need to be on the agenda. Josh, am I correctly summarizing? And does anybody object? Does anybody actually want to talk about this issue here and now rather than in GitHub? Josh, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Nope. I'm happy to save my voice. Thank you.
All right, well, that's a lot of silence, so I'm going to take that as consent that this can get kicked back to GitHub and the CTC agenda label can be removed from it. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do that right now. So
Yeah, I already did that.
You already did it. Great. Okay, then I'm not going to bother. Super duper. We have two other issues, and then we have the inspect, debug, break thing that Raphael Ackerman wants us to discuss, and the LTS locking of the staging branches that I think Miles at least wants us to mention. And is there anything else that we need to have on the agenda today before we move on to one of those two topics? Awesome. Okay. Miles, why don't you take it away with the LTS? Unless, yeah, let's just start with that. Unless I don't know, because I have to pick one.
Yeah. So very high level catch up. A week or two ago, I can't recall exact dates. We had a meeting of the first meeting of a backport working group, or I guess a backport team, which is a spinoff of the LTS working group, which is not officially a working group because it's not chartered. That aside, the group was working out some of the semantics for distributing the backporting workload that is, I've been, for the most part, a single point of failure for. And the main hope here is, A, to distribute the work to more people in the project, give more people in the project the opportunity to do more hands-on release stuff, and also to remove single points of failure from our release process. That involves coming up with, more defined process around labeling and backporting, and, that's all great. But one of the things that we discussed, which, I wanted to bring to the CTC, was the idea of limiting permissions on staging branches. So right now we have a V4X staging, a V6X staging, and a V7X staging. There will soon be a V8 staging. What we are proposing as a backporting team, which was agreed upon by the LTS working group as well, was that the LTS branches, staging branches, and release branches would, or I guess we only discussed the staging branches, that the LTS staging branches would be locked with only permissions to people from the backporting team being able to push to it. There were some very light pushback around whether or not that would slow down the workflow. With the number of people who overlap between the CTC, the release team, and the backporting team, we do not believe that there will be any sort of, slowdown to or extra process introduced. This is more about basically the sanity of the branch. Like if we know that that branch is stable and every commit that's on it has been audited, we can move a lot faster with the releases. So basically wanted to just present this idea. I'll repeat it really quickly from a high level. We want to make the staging branches for LTS only pushable by the backporting team. Does anyone from the CTC have any objections to this?
So V8X staging would be open to everybody until it went LTS, then it would be locked?
That's correct.
Sounds great to me.
So one thing that just dawned on me that I am thinking that maybe we should do as well, but I'm more than happy to punt it off to an issue so we can actually discuss it, would be that perhaps the release branches V6X, 4X, 8X, etc., should actually be locked only to the release team. But I'll start a separate issue about that, and we can make sure that there's that actually gives everyone a chance to see it and objective they see problems. But I'm just gonna one more time throw it out there. If no one has any objections to locking the staging branches, I plan to make an official team for the backport team and assign those permissions after this meeting.
Does that doesn't stop people opening pull requests against those branches, does it? It just means that that team was the only team that will be able to land those pull requests that exist.
I believe so, because this is the same thing that could be done on master, for example, or any other branch. I will throw out there that if we find that this does anything that is blocking workflow, we will revert quickly and move back to old permissions. So that was something that was raised by Shigeki around some of the security stuff. And he was very happy with using a PR-based workflow rather than landing directly. If that was like kind of the only extra step that was introduced, he didn't have a problem with that.
Okay, sounds good. Gonna wait another 5 seconds to see if anybody has any other questions or concerns. Okay, sounds like we can, sound like I didn't exactly give 5 seconds, but sounds like we can move on. So pasting an issue in the, it's a node in the node repo, it's issue 12630, and the title is Uniform Way to Trigger Debugger on First Line. It was opened by Raphael. And judging from the text in there and the text in other related issues, I think it's pretty clear that the intention is that this to elevate this to the CTC meeting, even though it doesn't have a CTC agenda label on it. It's probably only people on the CTC fully routinely understand that CTC review is stuff that we just are want to remember to look at, but not necessarily discuss at meetings. And then CTC agenda is for stuff at meetings. However, since I think the intention was pretty clear to put this on the agenda, we should at least acknowledge it. So this is about, actually, does someone who's been following this more closely than me, preferably somebody involved in either diagnostics or LTS, want to explain the issue here briefly, and we can decide what, if anything, we need to act on it today. Kind of looking in Josh's direction and Miles's direction.
I did look over the issue beforehand, so I can take a shot here. When we added inspect, well, let's go back a little bit. We had debug and debug-brk. Debug brk did a little hacky magic to inject a debugger statement or something that made it stop on the first line. When --inspect was added with inspector, that wasn't added. So by default, the inspector was turned on, but it didn't break on the first line, which sometimes people want that, so they can set other breakpoints or whatever. So at first, people were just using --inspect and --debug break to kind of get both of those things. Somewhere along the way, it was actually me that added a PR for --inspect break or -brk to kind of parallel the debug break. And actually, Eugene Ostro from Google actually put in a better way to do that than the way we were doing it back in the day. Then when we removed --debug in one of the latest releases, I think we removed debug break at the same time, and people that were depending on inspect and debug break together, which people kind of use from 6.3 to 7.6 or so, it started breaking them. So the request is that we add, I think there's a few things open at this point, but there's a request to add back debug break or to some other way of uniformly breaking on that first line. Now, I don't know what exactly they want our input on. I guess.
So
I think
I can
Which
chime in.
one?
Yeah.
I can chime in a little bit here, Josh, because I've been following the issue a little closely the last couple of days. So I think at a really high level, the challenge was so vendors who are using the protocol are having to do like some sort of version sniffing to figure out what version it is. I think they just wanted a consistent story as far as like what to expect between different versions and for us to be explicit. Now, the way I'm viewing this right now is like, it seems to me like we've kind of just piecemealed a whole bunch of different APIs in here, kind of just as we've gone. Like there's this thing and it was legacy, so we've been renaming things to kind of fit with it. I'm under the impression that if we just pick an API and stick to it and make it clear to the vendors what those APIs are, we should be good. I think Refac is listening. If you are, you can ping in on the Node Dev IRC if I'm off on any of this. But kind of what I've been pushing as a way forward is for us to define an API that seems reasonable and then figure out what we want to do as far as the backporting story is. So like one suggestion that was made earlier was backporting inspect break to 6, but that doesn't necessarily solve anything because older versions of 6 still don't have it. The other possibility was like re-implementing debug break. You know, this is the stuff that Josh has already gone over. I think that truthfully, we should push this back to the issue. I don't think that we'll have any problems reaching consensus in there. I think it's just good for us to be aware of this and the fact that if we want to make any December major changes, you know, we have less than 2 weeks to kind of put that together. Again, I'll just state at a high level, my gut is that we should be just coming up with an API that makes sense for 8 and then appropriately backport.
Yeah, and I think I was in part of that discussion. That accurately reflects what I remember. And I like the suggestion you made, which is like, let's choose what we think it should be, regardless of what we have today, and then try and make that the consistent story, as opposed to choosing one of the existing ones, none of which seems to be great.
Okay, so it sounds like we probably want to let this brew in the GitHub issue tracker for another week, and hopefully there'll be a resolution there. And if not, you know, at that point we can look at it again and either decide that we want to make a decision or refer it to LTS or refer it to diagnostics or whatever we want to do at that time. Is that an accurate taking of the temperature of the body right now?
I'd say yes.
Yeah. All right, then let's do that. Let's see where it is in another week or so, and hopefully we get some resolution in the issue. We're at the point of the meeting then where we take questions. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, I want to thank Jeremiah for streaming this thing to YouTube. I want to thank Josh for taking the minutes because that's super important. And let's see here. So there's if you're a collaborator, there's a collaborator summit in Berlin on May 4th and 5th. If you are a member of CTC or TSC or one of the working groups, you might be interested in the TC39 meetup on May 22nd in New York. Otherwise, the next CTC meeting will be 1 week from today, quote unquote. It might be a different day depending on your time zone. It'll be a different day for me, but it'll be at 0500 UTC rather than this one started at 8 p.m. 2000 UTC.
Just a note on that.
Yeah.
Quite a few of us will be traveling to Berlin at that time, so it's likely to be a very light meeting.
Yeah, and it's a time that we're looking at changing anyway. So yeah, there's a really good chance that that will be a sparsely attended meeting if it happens. But that's the way these things go sometimes. Okay, do we anything else anybody wants to add before we ask Jeremiah if we have any questions? All right, Jeremiah, have any questions come in?
Yeah. So Raphael asks if he can get a general permission to negotiate a JIP handoff to us.
What does that mean?
I assume that means that he would like to try to. I mean, I don't really know because we could just fork it.
I think he's talking about. Yeah, I think he's talking about an issue Node.js / CTC issues 110, 110. I think he discusses. I think it's in there that he discusses having talked with. Oh, maybe it's not in there. Maybe it's somewhere else. I thought having discussed with people on the V8. Actually, Miles, I think you talked to him about this as well.
Well, it is mentioned in that issue.
Is this like? Is that part of it essentially just making our fork of JIP, if we had one, like official? Is that the premise behind this? Because I mean, like actually forking it and just using that is not going to be terribly difficult, obviously.
I was under the impression that so I think the question at a high level is like, should we be like making a fork or getting a handoff of JIP so that we can strip a whole bunch of things out of it that are not necessary for what we're doing. Now, I think that like the high level thing that we were talking about before, and like, please someone correct me because I totally don't remember properly, but at some point in one of the V8 calls, I believe that we discussed the path forward with like JIP and GN, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. We did talk about that with Hashseed and the other ones. Yeah.
I can comment on that if there are more questions.
Yeah, Francesca, I should just ask you. So wasn't the idea that like we would be able to work with the V8 team and to get our build for Node using GN instead of JIP?
Exactly. So we are working on building Node with V8 using GN, or building V8 with GN and using that inside Node, and we will get that to work because that we will put on our build bot.
But I don't think that solves all the problems because like modules still will have to be built with JIP, right?
Isn't GN like pretty large?
Well, it's just one way to build it. And then, of course, everybody can keep using JIP. I think in the close future, there won't be anything in GN that we can't one-on-one copy and paste into JIP. So it's not that just because it's not officially supported anymore, we have to stop using it. It's just that we can't promise that it will work for the next 10 years with everything new that we do. But it will just work for quite a much longer while. I'm pretty sure about that.
So I was under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is like there's two different problems that we need to solve. One of the problems is building Node itself, and the other problem is our native module ecosystem. So the moving from JIP to GN is explicitly for solving the problem of building Node itself, which is completely tangential to the ecosystem issue with JIP. So where I would like to scope this, if it's helpful, is I think where Raphael's coming from is what we're doing for like Node JIP and the native module story for people externally. And I think that the idea there would be that if we either fork JIP or get a handoff of JIP, would A, then make it so that the Chromium project no longer needs to maintain it, which would be a benefit to them. B, would allow us to remove a bunch of things from it that we don't need. and also potentially create, a plan towards Fedora's JIP.js project where we would no longer necessarily need the Python 2 dependency. So this would be a two-stage thing. So if we move to GN, Francisca, GN, is that still a Python 2 dependency for that?
No. Wait, no, I think it does need Python. Actually, I'm not sure, but it's pretty big and it needs Python. It's just one way that you could build V8 and use it inside Node. And there's
Do you know if
really
it's Python 2
no.
or Python 3?
No, I think it's 2.
Okay.
And there's really no reason for Node to stay with JIP, especially if we are re-implementing it or anything. I mean, we can pick whatever we can make work.
So with that being said, and this was something that Ali was saying previously, was like, I think that there's a higher level question, like, and I think Rod can speak to this. We got a bunch of people to adopt JIP, and we got a bunch of people to adopt Node.js as our native module story, and like, that's where the ecosystem is living right now. I think that there was a higher level question if we should explore CMake or some other tools for actually handling building of native modules. But I think that we want to try to like avoid that churn as much as possible, and like not just playing hot potato with what is appropriate today versus like, what's good in 5 years. So perhaps like what we should be doing, and like this is definitely something that I have an interest in, and I'm sure there's other people have interest in, is explicitly focusing on the native module story and figuring out what we want that path to be and making informed decisions as far as ecosystem stability. Rod, if you have anything to say about JIP versus CMake, or just like, what it's taken to get
I think the meeting is not the point to discuss the build systems. I mean, we can do that on the issue tracker.
Okay, that's fair.
I will throw in that some of the VS 2017 stuff we had to do now, and we're still kind of struggling with, is in the past we could have relied on upstream JIP to handle, and now a lot comes to us, and that kind of thing will probably happen more and more often.
Yes, my hope is that you can copy a lot of the changes from the GN build that we have. So it is work, but it isn't figuring out everything from scratch.
So I think that we should maybe look at spinning a team out of build to specifically focus on the native module story and the ecosystem, and we can start conversations there, unless anyone objects to that as kind of a next action.
And about the initial question, whether we give permission to a handoff or anything, I think this we as the CTC would have to discuss this and think it through. But in general, there's no problem in forking an open source project and stripping down the parts that we don't need for Node. And it's also not a V8 tool, so the V8 team would be the wrong people to ask about handing it off.
Yeah, I think I meant to say Chromium. Sorry about that. Jeremiah, are there any other questions?
Someone generally asks, is there anything new coming in Node that we should be aware of? Does anyone have anything particularly big they'd like to talk about to that?
I guess how new, like the NAPI is something new that's coming in Node version 8 is experimental, so that's something good to look at.
Yeah, completely new native API for native add-ons coming in
Yeah.
Node 8 as experimental.
There's a new like a new debug protocol. I mean, it's not new, but it's still newish, I think.
The the URL, the new WG URL implementation is getting very close to be able to take out of experimental. That might be I may graduate up here soon.
Right.
I'm looking at the 8.0 release proposal to see what other
Anything we'll be
majors,
getting out of anything we'll be getting out of V8 that we're not getting in Node 7 out of V8.
Mostly just performance updates.
There's there are a fairly large number of Semver major commits in the changelog for V8.
Yeah, when
Zero.
I looked, there was 143, but when I went through them, they all seemed relatively minor.
Yeah.
Updating an error message probably.
Yeah, they were. Every time I looked in, like I only looked at about 5 or 6, but everyone I looked into it was something like that. Like, well, we think this might change the edge case behavior, so we'll make it Semver major. Or yeah, we're changing an error message. You know, things that we really don't expect most people to run into, but we're conservative, which is good, and they're therefore marked as Semver major.
Yeah, I think most
I think
of
one
them
of
are
the
just
biggest
sensitive.
the biggest changes from a Semver major might be the removal of the old API for debugging.
Yeah.
And the turbofan ignition stuff, which is not landing yet, but is something that we're considering landing, would be a pretty big change.
Yeah, although technically that won't be major, will it?
Well, the question wasn't for Semver major. It was just, was there anything new on the horizon? So it counts.
Yeah,
So,
that would definitely be something potentially new.
Colin
Looking a
mentioned
little bit-
in the chat here, Semver major releases are boring now. Semver minor is where all the fun is, and that's like pretty true, honestly, and it's kind of intentional. So
yeah.
There's that. Go on.
I was going to say down the road, you know, hopefully by end of June, we should have the initial HTTP2 PR ready for everyone to review. So, woohoo!
Someone else asks, in version 8, NAPI will be experimental. So will I continue to use actual Node with Node API or NAN?
I think the answer is we're hoping module authors will try it out, give us lots of feedback, but until it becomes non-experimental, you know, for production use, to continue to use NAN.
And the reason for that is that while it's experimental, the likelihood of breaking changes is far greater. And we don't want anyone putting anything in production and then they upgrade a Semver minor patch version of Node and then everything comes crashing down. So.
All right. Anything else in the question queue?
Those are the questions I have on YouTube, unless anyone sees something in IRC or anywhere else.
Nothing in IRC, no.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for coming, everybody. And let's do it again next week at a completely different time. And while a bunch of us are traveling and won't be able to attend, talk to a small subset of you then.
I was going to say, we'll see you all then.
Thanks.
Right. Thanks, everyone.